The recipe for writing is one ass, one chair, one pen, one piece of paper, write for 7 minutes, and dare to suck. Hi, everybody. Welcome today to the 7-Minute Writer. My guest this morning is a person I know. She has the same last name as mine, Colleen Kimmitt. And she's my first cousin's daughter, which makes her my first cousin once removed. I figured this out last night. And we need to know that. And I've watched her and read some of her writing and her interest in the environment and how she's found her voice as a writer. Her work is usually published in places like The Guardian, Globe and Mail. Colleen, is it Tyee? That's how you say it?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. So I thought, for those of you that want to write sort of a shorter piece with a limited number of words, I wanted to access Colleen's knowledge and see how she got involved in this kind of thing. And I imagine you'll have some good ideas. So welcome. And the first thing I want to ask you is, when you were young, did you write a lot as a kid, stories, or were you kind of called to writing and processing things later as a writer?
I definitely wrote a lot as a kid. And, my parents still have copies of the stories I wrote. Often they were illustrated, often, drawing from real life, but much more fantastical. One story I wrote was about my friend and I getting locked in the mall overnight and all of the fun we had.
Was it based on truth?
I think we liked going to the mall. Yeah.
You just hope. I always said it isn't true, but I help the truth along because the truth is often boring. So you started to write, and then did you go into a formal writing program like journalism or literary studies?
Yeah, I always knew I liked to write, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to university. And I just happened to notice, as I was looking through, the materials that they sent to high schools, that there was a journalism program. I thought, hey, journalism is writing. I hadn't really thought about being a reporter or being a journalist much, but I wanted to pursue writing. I thought, this is something I can do. This is something I love and I enjoy.
So when you went into that program, what kind of writing were you called to if it wasn't just journalism?
Well, I did do journalism. I did have a career in journal as a reporter. I was definitely called to the kinds of stories and the kind of outlets as well that let me do longer form pieces with more narrative rather than news. I know some people in my program really love chasing the story, chasing the news, getting the scoop. For me, I was always more interested in telling stories, having the space and time with people to tell their stories.
Right. And that's interesting because when I was 15 or 16, I got hired for the Napanee Beaver as a reporter. And the first weekend I was working, the Gibbard furniture lit on fire. Somebody died and there was a tractor pull. And I literally went, I hate this. And I also had such a fantastical imagination. I didn't want to report on just the news. I found out the people and of course they didn't want that. But so a couple questions. When you talk about the narrative, how does that get implemented in say, what's a regular column, 1,100 words? So like how many words would you have in some to do that narrative kind of reporting?
I think it requires, at least 1,100 or 1,200 words minimum.
Yeah.
And then, up to, you see like pieces in magazines that can be up to 8,000 pieces or words or 10,000 words, which is almost like a short story length, I suppose.
Which kind?
I was always more in the shorter range, like more around, say, 1,200 to 2,000, maybe 2,500 words.
It's funny because when we talk, when I start teaching memoir, people will hand me gobs of materials, 3,000 words, and I say you have to get it down to 800 because it forces the constraint of a number, a word count is where you'll find the story. And yes, you may want to expand it if you're not a gun for hire kind of thing. Did you find, was there a certain word count that you felt really comfortable in? Like there was a pocket where you could really 1,200 words worked, or was that too short for how you thought?
I like that range. Yeah, I think around 2000 is a good length for me that allows me to tell a story, to get into the narrative. But it's short. It's which can be easier in a sense, I think, when I was reporting and researching. Although I can see, and I've had writing peers and workshop participants who, they had a big story, a lot of personal details, personal memories, personal anecdotes that wouldn't easily fit into that length, 2000 words. But I think you're right. Having a word limit can help you structure and focus what your piece is really about, what you really want to say.
Yeah. So if you were doing a narrative on a particular subject, I know you were kind of called to environmental pieces, or the way certain governing bodies were dealing with the environment. What kind of hours did you put into, say, let's say a 2,000 word piece? What kind of hours for research, writing, rewriting? I like to ask this because so many of my writers, they just want to spend very little time and they don't realize how much work it takes. In your case, even harder because you've got to keep it factual, and you can, with memoir, you can muse a lot. But with this kind of essay, you have to keep your narrative voice more focused, right? So what was say, if you want, how many hours? 10, 50?
Yeah, I think 15 is, 15 to 20 hours is reasonable. I would say often, when I was working reporter, writing, say a 2,000 word, 1,500 word, a little more analytical piece, I could spend like the better part of a week on that, but I might be doing things in between. And sometimes, I think giving writing some space can be really useful as well. I tend to write in bursts. So I'll write a bunch and then leave it for a day, and then, come back, write more, maybe edit. And then I find I'm often working on pieces in my mind, working through pieces in my mind, even when I'm not at my desk or at my laptop.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always found too. I was writing a play and I went into a guy's office who was a playwright in residence, and he said, so sometimes painting walls you're really writing, because you're and also physicality. I'll be walking and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of, like, I've just finished a memoir and I'm still rewriting it, but literally it's been 2.5 years and I left it for 2 months while I did my new show. And the other day I was walking and I went, oh, I've not even thought of that. I should answer that question. So I think that, don't you find that writing is a lot about holding questions in your head as well as just finding a solution or an ending? Like you're wondering, is this a question my reader will have? Because often if I've got the question, the reader, or in my case, the audience, will have that same question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is, answering questions, answering big questions often too is what can really engage your reader and drive the narrative forward, especially in nonfiction, whether that's a reported piece or memoir or a personal essay. And I like to also talk about my writing, because often, with friends or in my writing group, and I think it's been very useful for me to have writing groups. You know, that group has changed over the years, but I almost always have like am plugged into a group of writers who are working on their own projects. And I like to talk about my writing in process, because often other people will point out those questions that I hadn't thought of, or that, oh yeah, that is the next logical step.
Especially when you're close to a subject, because sometimes you get so close that you get lost in there. I said it's like you know, a 5,000 piece puzzle of snow where you're going, I don't know where I am. And then someone asks you like this little thing and you go, oh my gosh, that's the answer. You know, wanted to just one of the thing is, I was watching the George Carlin documentary, and he gets interviewed a lot, you know, and he said, it would be dangerous for me to try and go out and do comedy to make people think. What I want them to do is know that I've been the one thinking. So when you write, are you putting that kind of what I'm thinking about this? Are you putting that musing part in as the kind of personal essays that you do? Or is it more just, here are the facts, here's what people said? Are you musing as well in the kind of work you've done previously?
Yeah, I definitely, in my journalism and in personal pieces that I've written, like non-reported pieces that I've written, that's it's almost like there's two layers to the piece. So one is the, you know, what is happening or what has happened, and the other layer is what that means.
Or but even if it's to you, it's through your filter, right? The reason
Exactly.
I ask this is, I have a lot of females in my memoir writing, and I also taught people how to write solo shows, and mostly female. And it was really hard for a lot of people, especially my generation, is to just have a point of view, because we've been trained to edit that out. Has that been a problem for you? Or because to me, that's what, when I get asked about my writing, they're like, yeah, I know what everybody else is thinking, but what are you thinking about this?
Yeah.
And I don't know, does that play into what you do as a writer?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think the best, and one of the best and the most easiest essays I ever wrote was about owning chickens, backyard chickens in Vancouver.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That just flowed. And it was because I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And I think it flowed because I didn't think about how anyone else would receive it. I've been thinking about this essay for a long time. And when I sat down and wrote it, I was very relaxed. I had no fear. I wasn't thinking about how, you know, the local food movement would receive it, or how, you know, any particular audience
friends or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it is a hurdle to overcome, having that point of view. I think that it's important to be unapologetic about it. I mean, it's useful to examine our beliefs and assumptions, but also keep in mind that you know, everyone has a unique point of view and a unique perspective, and you know, there's no original stories or narratives. It seems like we see the same types of stories over and over and over throughout all of human history, but no one is going to tell your story like you can.
Exactly. And it's that working with that constant critic who tells you that you can't say that, or what would people think, that really gets in the way of point of view and the specifics of, like, chickens, for example. Yeah, I love that. I love that that's the kind of story. One of the things is I sometimes just write down everything I'd like to say if I wasn't afraid. And even though sometimes it doesn't end up in the piece, it makes me put hiccups in there. And you know, in comedy, you're always second guessing, is there somebody in the audience? Because often the comic is in live time going, I know what you're thinking. You think I know what you want to do. You want to cancel me. You're doing that to say, I've already thought of that side of things. And I see that good writing on the page has that kind of element to it. It's like, oh, you could look at it this way. And even though you might not be addressing the reader directly, there's an implication that I've done some of that thinking for you. I thought about your objections a little bit. Great. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I want to ask a couple things. So you said something that I think is really key, and I was really touched during COVID because a lot of my online classes grew. And what really happened, as much as I taught memoir, was that people built a community. And that community is so key because it's such a soul sucking job at times where you're just like, I don't know why I'm doing this. So just tell me a couple of reasons you love that kind of writing community, and what does a good community feel like for people?
I think, why do I like it? I like it because there's a sense of camaraderie. Being a writer, like it's kind of difficult, gut-wrenching work sometimes. And so I'm with people who get it. I like it because there's accountability. In many of my writing groups, we've had regular meetings, and that even if it's an hour before the meeting, that means I'm getting in something new that I can share with the group or show to the group. It's very motivating for me to have that accountability to people. And then as, having, I think, an audience of readers who know what it's like to put their work out there, and so who can offer feedback in a spirit of generosity.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes just ask questions. And sometimes when I see that people didn't understand a thing, I'm so shocked that I thought I'd said it, and it's in my head. And on stage, you can condense something, use your face, and explain it with your face. So many times I do this little punchline. People go, "What do you mean by that?" And I'm like, "Well, it means da 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 da." And they go, "You got to put that on the page." And I'm always so mad because I think, don't I know this by now? So just quick 2 or 3 tips about what you've learned as a writer, or your process, what you would suggest for people that are trying to get a practice of writing together.
Well, one piece of advice that my reporting professor gave me that has helped me in my personal writing as well, and helped me kind of manage my ideas into, okay, how can I actually make this into a piece, like something, how can I bite off from this big idea and get it in writing in a story, was to kind of think about the difference between subject and story. And so I want to write about how my mother died of cancer. That's a subject, like it's big, it's hard to kind of wrap your arms around, where as a story often involves like a how or a why or a when, some kind of motivation. For example, I want to write about, how my mother died of cancer, versus I want to write about how my mother's death brought my sister and I closer together.
Oh, I love that. That's what I try. That is so cool. That and that is the specifics then. The subject is the big macro, and that how it brought my sister together is the micro, and through the details we see that bigger subject play out, right?
Yeah, it's like the people doing something for a reason or because of a reason is the story, the difference between the story and a subject.
Oh, I love that. That's good. I might even use that as our title. One other thing is, as a writer, I'm sure you're always excited by new stories, and we get distracted by having to pay the bills and have relationships. But is there a call in you to write something in the near future, or anything?
Oh, yes.
Would you like to go bigger with some of your
yes.
And what are those things? Because I think, sometimes we get lost in our everyday life. And I said, to me, writing is like drinking was for me. I was drinking, I was getting over drinking, I was about to drink. And writing is the same. I'm writing I'm getting over writing or I'm thinking of writing. Like it obsesses me. Does it obsess you in some way?
Yeah, I don't want to go into details on this project, but I'm working on a book proposal. I've never written a book length project. It feels huge. It feels like, no, this is never going to be a book. You're never, like, I'm fighting these kind of, you're never going to, it will never work out. But I joined a group to specifically people who are working through book proposals. So that's what I'm working on now. And it's also doing a proposal. It's not a book. I am going to try and sell it, but I think even if your primary goal is not necessarily selling this piece of writing, I think the proposal part of it, sketching out, okay, what's the idea in a nutshell? What would each chapter include, has been a really useful process for me and a more manageable chunk to bite off as at least a first step to this project that seems really big and daunting.
And that little puppy in your head will start writing it while you're sleeping anyway. And you're like, okay, come on, I don't have time this week. And it's just like, what did you think about chapter 1? Because, that's what happens to me. I wake up and go, oh my, I'm always interested in that. So lastly, we'll just finish with this. What, you do some writing workshops. Tell me what you offer and just give your, maybe your deets, as they say, to tell where people might get a hold of if they wanted to do some kind of more, I don't know how it's not a memoir per se, more like a personal essay. Is that how you teach, or what do you teach?
Well, I'm not teaching at the moment. I was teaching with a sort of a workshop studio here in Montreal. That we unfortunately lost our space and went on a bit of a hiatus. So I'm not currently, I don't have any upcoming workshops, but yeah, the workshops that I did teach were personal essay workshops, which I think it's a really nice way into writing. I think many of the people who came already had ideas, and that workshop structure just gave them some, I don't know, the motivation, the discipline they needed to do it.
Finally, I just want to ask you, you do at different times teach writing workshops, and maybe you could just tell a couple sentences about the kind of approach you use and what you talk about in them, and maybe your Twitter handle or something so people can follow you in case you have any coming up in the future.
Yeah, so my workshops are nonfiction, so sometimes that's a personal essay. Sometimes people do some interviews or some reporting. I like to show examples of great essays. I like to give people a bit of homework every week so that they're coming to the group with something new. I like to ask participants to read aloud. I think that's really useful in understanding the flow and rhythm in writing.
And where can they follow you?
They can follow me at, so my Twitter handle is at Colleen Kimmett.
Okay, great. And I'll put that up as well on the YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much today, Colleen. I really appreciate you coming, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the next Kimmett reunion.
All right. Thanks, Deb.